Okay, I'm Dean Sampson. I'm a member of the Board of Trustees here at Cedars, and I'm here for the announcements for this week. After the service today, Reverend Zachary will be presenting a presentation on the history of UU, and I believe it is Rod Kimkus, or is that next week? That's next week. Okay, so he'll have to surprise you with the topic for today's introduction to the history of UU. Also, well, on Monday, tomorrow, the Climate Smart Challenge Zoom meeting will be held. There are now 16 Cedars families who are part of this group, and they meet monthly, I believe. So families and individuals can learn how to reduce our impact on the environment. The next meeting is tomorrow at 7 p.m. It's a Zoom meeting, and if you would like to participate, contact Mike Cox. Also tomorrow is the first of three meetings that the Social Justice Committee is hosting for a postcard writing event to help get out the vote for these midterm elections. This is an extremely important issue, and there's actually 3 dates: tomorrow at 9 a.m., and these are at the Cedars Center. Tuesday, the 18th at 3 p.m., and Thursday at 5 p.m. Next week, there is a special collection. The special collection is held once a month, and it goes to organizations, not-for-profit organizations, as a way of part of our community outreach. Next week, the Social Justice Committee will be collecting donations for Earth Justice, which is a nonprofit public interest environmental law organization providing legal support in environmental issues. And finally, on the 25th, which is a week from Tuesday, Super Suppers, teamed with Kol Shalom, presents the Super Suppers at Eagle Harbor Community Church. This is an opportunity for us to provide meals, evening meals, for people who might be getting low on income at the end of the month. It's open to all comers. This month, Cedars will be doing the entree, and Kol Shalom will be doing everything else. We're looking for volunteers. We only need a couple, but if you would like to experience this really fun event, you can contact me or Mike Cox. I think that's it.
Into this space, you are invited to bring all of the stories and experiences that make you, you, and know that you are enough. No matter who you love, how you move through the world, or what you have done, today know that you are enough. This is the story this morning that I hope we learn to tell about ourselves, to deepen our sense of connection to one another in this community, and in our belief in the inherent worth and dignity of every person, even you. Bring this story and bring your stories together in this space as we come together to worship. Come, let us worship together. shoes.
Hello, welcome to Cedars. My name is Johanna Munson, and I'm your worship associate today. Where do we come from? Who are we? Where are we going? These are familiar questions that humans have been curious about since the beginning of time. Different cultures have come up with a variety of myths about how it all began, and these creation myths have many elements in common. There was nothing, and then there was something. A god or gods appeared. The earth was created, along with the sun and moon and fire and water. Living things appeared, plants and animals, and finally humans. And strife, but also joy, came to be. I was an Asian studies major in college and studied Japanese language, literature, and history, so I'd like to share an abbreviated version of the Japanese creation myth. There was a shapeless kind of matter in complete silence. Then sounds began as the particles of matter began to move. The lighter particles began to rise to the top of the universe and became the clouds and heaven. The denser, darker particles sank and became earth. Gods with no defined gender appeared spontaneously. And eventually, female and male gods appeared. The seventh generation of these gods, Izanagi, the male, and Izanami, the female, began to create the Japanese archipelago in a variety of manners by touching their spears to the earth, tears and decaying bodies falling from the heavens, and islands bubbling up from the seas. Japan is in the Ring of Fire, after all. There's an interesting cultural detail here. These two gods had to get remarried because Izanami, the female, spoke first at their wedding and created all kinds of chaos. At the second one, she was silent until Izanagi spoke. I have to wonder if the traditionally subordinate role of Japanese women arose from this myth. So we have these myths that operate on a broad level, that of a culture, but I'm curious about how we come up with our own personal creation myths. How did I come to be who I am? And can I change if I'm not experiencing all that I want? The feelings, the joy and the sorrow, the community and the independence, the continued growth towards soul. As we move towards fall and crisper days and cooler nights, one of my great joys is to turn inwards and curl up with a book as night comes earlier and earlier. Reading has always been a favorite pastime of mine, and as a child, I loved finding fairy tales from different cultures. To me, fairy tales are creation myths on a personal level. They are stories of what it means to be human, with archetypal roles such as the evil stepmother, the motherless girl, or the handsome prince. They show us how to deal with and overcome adversity. Hansel and Gretel shoving that witch into the oven, or the reality of life, the little match girl who actually dies. I'll never forget crying my eyes out the first time I read that ending. So, how have fairy tales impacted my personal creation myth? For many years, I was a stay-at-home mom, putting lots of energy into my kids' lives, some into my marriage, but not paying a whole lot of attention to developing my own sense of self, my potential, other than in those roles of mom and wife. I'd like to share a Japanese fairy tale. This is the story of the rabbit in the moon, and it's traditionally told at this time around the fall full moon, and it resonated with me. So I'm going to share it by doing a little play here. So I need some volunteers. Here, Jeff, you look like a good beggar. And I'm going to have you be the fox. Here, would you be the fox? Let's see, Jane, you want to be the monkey? And Claire will have you be the rabbit. So please come up to the area here and just follow along. You don't have to say anything, just follow the story as I tell it. So one night, Sakura, who is right now a beggar, came down to earth, disguised as a beggar. He chanced upon a fox. Where's the fox? Yes, so the fox. And he said he was hungry. So the fox said that he would find some fish to give to the beggar. So would you find some fish, please, and give it to the beggar? Just in the stream. They're right there. There you go. Thank you. Oh, wonderful. All right. And then the monkey brought fruit from the trees. So the monkey went and picked some wonderful apples and pears and gave them to the beggar. But the rabbit was unsure. He said, all I can eat is grass. So what is it? What am I going to do? And so he asked the beggar to build a fire. And so the beggar made a lovely bonfire, and then the rabbit decided to throw himself or herself onto the fire. Awed by the rabbit's generosity, the beggar transformed back into Sakura, the ruler of heaven, pulled the rabbit from the fire, and placed the rabbit's image on the moon for all to see. All right, you may return to your seats. Thank you. And now, if you look at the full moon, you can see the outline of the rabbit pounding mochi on the moon. It's sort of, the ears come over to the right, and the body is to the left, so next time there's a full moon, check that out, look at it. And the tale even goes on to explain why the moon is gray. It's seen through the smoke of the fire on that fateful night. So thank you very much to our actors. So what theme stands out to you in this tale? Self-sacrifice is what spoke to me. And in my own case, I took this theme of self-sacrifice to an extreme as a wife and mother. I realize now I went into depression, I withdrew from most of the activities that did not involve my kids, and didn't really have great communication skills about my feelings. It took the total disruption of my life, the end of my marriage, becoming an empty nester, and total chaos, right? Everything went back to pretty much nothing. So I went back to my own creation myth, and I was able to open my heart and my mind and allow my soul to emerge. So I dedicate the lighting of our chalice today to the never-ending process of discovery and evolution, whether it be on the cultural, institutional, or personal level. Please join me in reciting our affirmation as printed in the order of service. As we come together to worship, we remind ourselves to treat all people kindly, because we are to take good care of the earth, because it is our home, and to live lives full of love and goodness, because that is how we will all become the best that we can be. Now we will hear the sing hymn number 1045.
All right. So hymn number 1045, and for the intro to this hymn, I will start, and if everyone could come in on balm. There is a balm in Gilead to make the wounded whole. There is a balm in Gilead to heal the sin-sick soul. Sometimes I feel discouraged and think my work's in vain. But then the Holy Spirit revives my soul again. There is a balm in Gilead to make the wounded whole. There is a balm in Gilead to heal the sin-sick soul. If you cannot preach like Peter, if you cannot pray like Paul, you can tell the love of Jesus and say he died for all. There is a balm in Gilead to make the wounded whole. There is a balm in Gilead to heal the sin-sick soul. Morning, everyone. So today, I'd like to talk about our belief bag. Each of us carries a belief bag. Of course, not everyone has such a stylish and functional bag. I can fit a lot of beliefs in here. But how do we get our beliefs? I don't think babies are born with beliefs. I think babies are born with needs. I think babies are born with a lot of overwhelming experiences. But it's when you're older that you start to accumulate these beliefs, perhaps like trick-or-treating in a belief bag. You walk up to an adult, maybe an adult conversation, and you hear a belief. And your bag's already open, so, whoop, that's in there. I'll look at that later. But in the belief bag, well, for the belief bag, as children, we gather beliefs from others, from parents, from TV, from church. But as Unitarians, we hold our belief bag in a very special way. Christians have beliefs. They believe in Jesus. Buddhists believe in the Four Noble Truths, and Muslims believe in Allah and the Prophet Muhammad. Unitarian Universalists hold our beliefs differently because we believe it's how we carry our faith. Now, some people, they carry their belief bag like a child, very, very open, like a child would, very open, in front of them, walking up, ready to accept anything anyone puts in their bag. Do you have anything for me, Wayne? My bag is open. No. It's okay. I'll come back. Are there any beliefs around here? There we go. Who'd I expect to get a belief from? So that's one way to carry your belief bag. Nice and open, out in front, very generous. Some people, they get their beliefs and they close their bag. They say, no, Wayne, I'll listen, but my belief bag is closed. If I like what I hear, I might open the bag, but it's closed for now. Now, some people will take their belief bag and hold it up like a bat, and they'll say, I believe in the golden rule. I believe everyone should be good to each other. I believe, I believe, I believe, I believe. That's all they talk about. It's almost like a weapon that they carry around, and people see it coming. They say, that belief bag looks a lot like a club. I don't want to share my beliefs or accept the clubbed beliefs. But I think as Unitarian Universalists, like I said earlier, we are more inclined to be open, to be accepting of beliefs, and we tend to keep our bag open. So if, say, there's something I'm not familiar with, I say, come on into the belief bag. I want to invest in you. I want to learn about you. And if my belief bag gets too full, I can just take something, ruffle around, and find the beliefs that I no longer hold. That's how Unitarian Universalists are different. We carry our beliefs in a different way, and we believe in a lot. Our core are the 7 principles, but we have many different faiths on top of that, which is why I think we're special. So, next time you hear a belief, next time you're out in public, try to imagine, where's my belief bag at? And this goes with concepts, general concepts. Do you believe what someone is telling you? Well, see if it fits in your belief bag. And if it doesn't, it's probably not for you. Thank you all.
My shoes are kind of squeaky today. Every time I walk, I kind of find myself smiling. Let's take a breath together. Breathing in and out. In your life, who told you you weren't good enough? Who told you you weren't capable of great things? Who said the story of your life is already written? Whoever it was, they were wrong. Let us begin rewriting that story, living that story as we write it. You are good enough. You are capable of great things. You are still alive and writing your story here in this very moment. You are worthy of love, worthy of giving and receiving. What do you want to be? How will you get to this destination? What is the narrative arc? What challenges will you face? And what support do you need? Where does your story end? Where is it that you want to end up, that you want all of us to end up? Now is the time to write that story together. Amen. I'd like to invite us to, Joyce and Sarah.
So now I invite you to come up if you have a joy or a sorrow. This is a time that is not on the live stream, so don't worry, it's not going to be shared. But when we hold our feelings in community, it can really help us feel supported. So if you would like to come forward, state your name and a sentence or two about what is something that is going on in your life. Pour some water for a joy and put a stone in the bowl for your sorrow so that we can hold you in community. Please come forward.
And now we will sing hymn number 1058, Be Ours a Religion, if we could don our masks. Be ours a religion which like sunshine shines everywhere, its temple of space, its shine a good heart, its freedom true, its ritual
This community, our beloved Cedars, was created in 1959, more than 60 years ago. We have evolved through many iterations, and we continue to do so. This would not be possible without your generous support, so we appreciate your continued generosity. Would the ushers please pass the basket while we listen to an excerpt from the St. Matthew Passion, played by Peter Spencer. Thank you so much for your gifts.
Growing up, when my family would go camping, there was always one story that would get told around the campfire without fail. To this day, I'm not entirely sure of the origin of this story, but as near as I can tell, it's a story very unique to my family. Perhaps it was one of my stepdad's tall tales, or maybe it was a story that my sisters and I made up somehow. Whatever the origin, the story of the toe-eating dog always got told around the campfire when we went camping. That's right. It was a story about a feral dog who had a taste for human toes. Somehow this dog had gotten loose. Maybe it slipped its leash or escaped from the pound or the laboratory of some mad scientist. We were never quite sure. But whatever the cause, this dog was on the loose where we were camping and was hungry for human toes. After this story was told, we would all go back to our tents. I remember climbing into my tent and being terrified. What if I'm the next victim of this toe-eating dog? What if he shows up in the night, chews through my tent and my sleeping bag, and gets my toes? I'd sleep with my toes curled tightly, or even sometimes with my shoes still on inside of my sleeping bag. Whatever the strategy, I was determined not to be the next victim of this toe-eating dog. Now, as an adult, I can look back and recognize this story is clearly a work of fiction. No one ever got their toes eaten on one of our camping trips. But back then, it seemed very real. Back on those camping trips, the line between what I would call fact and fiction became blurred, and it caused me to have a visceral reaction. Sometimes simply believing something is real is enough to cause us to act as such. There's a prominent example of this happening right now within our own country. Like many of you, I've been following the January Select Committee on Investigation of the January 6th attacks on the U.S. Capitol. The story that has come out of this committee is one of people believing an election was stolen, a belief that many of us know is false. It's a story of fiction perpetrated and that caused chaos and sought to undermine our democracy. I don't think that in this case we will ever get to know the full details of this story. It's very convoluted and confusing, and those telling it are probably still telling lies. But even if it's not true, it is a story that has shaped our country and continues to. Just like the case of the toe-eating dog, here we have another work of fiction shaping reality. Sometimes believing something is real is enough to cause us to act as such. The stories that we know and accept shape us. They inform and form who we are and how we engage the world. The stories received from family, friends, faith communities, political parties, and society at large all shape the possibilities we imagine and the values we hold. They all shape what we put in our belief bag. We all tell ourselves stories about what it means to be a Unitarian Universalist, for example, or maybe what it means to be a Washingtonian, or a U.S. citizen, or white, black, or any number of other identifiers we could name. All of these stories form the composite being of our identity. There's something about sharing stories that communicates more than mere facts. Stories help us to enter the experiences of others and come to a level of understanding that can only be known in our gut, not in our mind. We are the stories we tell. Stories are visceral. They cause us to curl our toes when sleeping in tents and even storm the Capitol. Stories cause us to move through the world. Sometimes just believing something is real is enough to cause us to act as such. My educational background in philosophy, creative writing, and theology has caused me to have a deep love of stories in my own life. All these disciplines rely on stories to illustrate examples, make their points, and engage others in the conversation that is happening. Thinking of my own dependence on story, narrative, and metaphor, I'm reminded of an excerpt from a reading we considered from the Gnostic Gospel of Thomas last week. The passage says that truth does not come into the world without robes. It enters through words and pictures. Truth cannot be received by the world in any other way. Stories allow us to communicate truth to one another through words and pictures, through symbols. These words and pictures in turn shape our understanding of what it is that is true. We never know if the understanding that I have and the one that you have is one and the same. But through telling our stories to each other, our words and images, sharing those words and images, we arrive at some semblance of what we feel is understanding. For me, I have come to call the words and pictures, the stories that I'm talking about, these narratives that undergird our reality, I call them myths, as many scholars do. Some people take offense to the use of the word myth to describe these very important stories. They find that it's dismissive. But in response, I'd say that whether they're fact or fiction, the stories that we tell do shape our reality. Myths are not literal truths about the world. They are metaphoric truths. That's why I choose to call these narratives myths. In the book Parallel Myths, J.F. Berlin says, "Our lives are saturated with myth, its symbol, language, and content, all which are part of our common heritage as human beings. Fables, fairy tales, literature, epics, tales told around campfires, and the scripture of great religions are all packages of myth that transcend time, place, and culture." When I refer to myth, this is what I'm referring to. It's not about a literal interpretation, but an understanding that lets us locate ourselves within the story, and through such an act of location, come to an empathetic connection with each other. Scholar Joseph Campbell has a body of work that explores specifically myths, and he says that myths are clues to the spiritual potentialities of the human life. Myths are the clues to the spiritual potentialities of human life. In Campbell's view, myths are stories that bring us into conversation with the human condition. For all myths are about trial and revelation. And through the trial and revelation, we are brought to deeper understanding. So, all this is great, but what happens in our life when we receive a story, when we receive a myth that we cannot relate to? What happens when the story you were told about yourself, or the story that you are still telling about yourself, isn't the one that you want to tell? Thankfully, when we look back on the canon of mythology throughout human history, we can find a narrative that helps to give an antidote to these situations. There is a mythological archetype that is present throughout all of human cultures and provides a balm to just these situations. It's a narrative arc that stories like Star Wars, Hamlet, The Lion King, which is just Hamlet told with lions, Harry Potter, and the Iliad all follow this arc. It's a structure for telling stories that scholars call the hero's journey. If you're not familiar with this narrative arc, here's a really brief outline. The hero's journey is divided into 3 acts. Act 1 is titled The Ordinary World. This is the place where ordinary individuals exist, people like you and I. And in this place, something happens where the individual receives a call to adventure of some kind, or is otherwise presented with a challenge that they must rise to defeat. Often, the individual in the ordinary world refuses the call or challenge at first, but is eventually convinced or forced to rise to the occasion. In this first act of the hero's journey, the hero often meets a mentor, someone who helps to set them on the path to accomplish the thing that they are being called to. The mentor helps the hero leave the ordinary world. Act 2 in this narrative arc is the call to adventure. The call to adventure follows when our hero crosses the threshold from the ordinary world and enters uncharted territory. Here our hero will be tempted, challenged, and forced to examine their innermost self before facing a climactic ordeal and claiming their reward. At this point in the myth, our hero faces the challenges that faces the thing that caused them to leave their home in the first place. It's often a great battle or some feat of extraordinary strength or cunning. But whatever the case, this is what the second act is about, the conflict and what comes from that conflict, which leads us to the third act of the hero's journey, the return to the ordinary world. This takes place after the goal has been achieved, after the treasures have been looted and all that, and the hero begins their quest back home. This act acknowledges that whatever happened in the middle has changed our hero. The process that they went through has transformed them, and as they prepare to return to the ordinary world, while things at home may still be the same, they are very different. What I think is so powerful about this particular narrative arc is the way it has been used through history to tell tales of transformation and overcoming. And yet, despite being so frequently used in many cultures, it still has not grown old. At some point in our lives, we have all faced impossible odds and somehow overcome them. And that is exactly the possibility that this story allows for. I'm going to share a bit of a personal story with all of you. It's a story that I have shared in bits and pieces in past sermons, but have yet to maybe go into this level of detail. So let's start with the first act. The Ordinary World, for me, was a story about my family. It was a story about the absence of my mother and the malicious presence of my stepdad, Johnny Wayne, and the resilience that my sisters and I developed. John worked as a commercial fisherman. He chose the profession following a stint as a mechanic, which followed his service in the Navy during Vietnam. John's employment was spotty, and even when he was working, his drinking prevented his paychecks from making it home. There were 5 kids in our house, myself and 4 sisters, 1 older and 3 younger than me, all born between 1986 and 2001, just to give you a reference point. With so many mouths to feed and little financial support from the, quote, man of the house, as John liked to be called, our family was dependent on food stamps and other government assistance, including the Social Security survivors benefits that my older sister and I received from the death of our own father. This stress was compounded by the physical and mental abuse my stepdad was prone to. It started the minute that we would wake up or walk in the door from school. In either situation, he was often found sitting or lying on the couch watching MASH reruns, a collection of beer cans and prescription pill bottles spread on the coffee table before him. In these moments, when we crossed John's path, he would do or say anything he could do to tear us kids down. I think it made him feel powerful. It didn't matter who came into the room. You were now the target. And the abuse didn't stop even if you left the room. John would follow you and continue the abuse. And even if he didn't follow you, the words would continue to flow through the house. Yells from the next room, bangs of doors and cupboards, things being thrown. And those were the days that you counted yourself lucky. At least he didn't hit you that day. At least he didn't touch you or grab you, or he didn't concoct some ridiculous punishment like trimming the lawn with scissors or sifting rocks from a swamp or moving firewood capriciously from one place to another, just because he could make you do it. On these lucky days, John liked to target each of us kids for something individually, something that would get under our skin particularly. For my older sister, Sadie, she was oftentimes told that she was a floozy or somehow was not of good moral character. For another sister, she was told she was lazy, dumb. For me, my stepdad liked to use gay slurs. I would walk through the door, stone-faced, bracing myself for what was to come. I would move past John, trying not to show any response, moving quickly. The insults would come and follow me even when I left the room. I pretended not to care. But even today, I know how deeply those words cut. I was in 2nd grade the first time that I was called a faggot. I didn't even know what the word meant. I wasn't even aware of my own sexuality. And yet still, in second grade, I was called that word. I was told I was stupid by the person who was supposed to care for me. The sense of worthlessness that I received at home was expounded on once I entered high school. As a shy, sensitive teen, I became the target of other boys at school. A rumor started there that I was gay. I wasn't even out to myself then. I wasn't out to anyone, but it didn't matter. In my freshman Spanish class, a group of boys would sit around me and whisper similar slurs as those my stepdad offered. I tried here to ignore them too. I was here to learn. I just wanted to ignore them and focus on what was being taught. But despite my indifference, things only got worse. One day, while sitting at my desk, staring at the whiteboard at the front of the room, one of these boys looked at me, put his hand down his pants, and when he pulled his hand back out, he was grasping a tuft of pubic hair, which he deposited on my notebook. "Here, I thought you'd enjoy this," he said. In this period of my life, in my Act 1, I felt helpless, and to escape turned to books. It didn't take me long to realize I could take refuge by reading for hours and hours on end. It was books like Harry Potter or Pablo Coelho's The Alchemist that showed me that there was possibilities of overcoming adversity. I loved these books. After high school, I became the first person in my family to go to college. I still not come to terms at this point with my own identity as a gay man. There was a lot I was still sorting through. But in 2010, something happened that changed my life. It started because my bank account was actually running low. I needed to get a job. And so I did what any college-age student would do and went on Craigslist. I found an ad posted for someone who was looking for a deckhand to work on their salmon fishing boat in Alaska for the summer. I got my job on the FV Misery by responding to this ad. The person who was posting the ad and why it piqued my interest had included a personal bio of theirs, and in the ad said they preferred that whoever they hired be gay. Now, in terms of labor law, I know that's not a legal practice, but it was something, in reading the bio, I was like, oh, this is interesting. So I spent the next several months emailing and talking with Chris, who would eventually become my boss. And eventually, that year, when the school year ended, I got on a boat and went up to Alaska for 3 months. For me, this was interesting. I mentioned my stepdad worked as a commercial fisherman, and so to be going into this context as a gay man, it felt a little strange to me. When I got to Alaska, the Misery was much smaller than I expected. That was the name of the boat, the FV Misery. At 31 feet, almost every square inch was put to use. Engines, fishing gear, tools, food, and personal belongings filled every nook and cranny. It was just the two of us on the boat, and the work was really hard. Long days of setting and hauling the net left me exhausted. And despite my exhaustion, there was still always more work to be done. I didn't mind it, though, because Chris and I had developed a quite close friendship, and I appreciated for the first time being able to be in this place and openly be who I was. He had expressed a similar appreciation. This is a good thing, because the thing about being on a boat all the time is that you are constantly around each other. So if you don't get along, it's not a great situation to be in. The other thing about being on a boat is that when something breaks, you have to fix it, even if you don't know how. This proved to be the case one night when we were setting our net off the southern tip of Mitkoff Island. The net got caught in a swift current and snagged on some rocks. We spent hours tugging the net, trying to get it unstuck, and when we finally did and got it in, our engine died. We were dead in the water, and waves were growing around us, growing larger and larger, pushing us towards the rocks that our net had just been stuck on. Despite the pressure of the situation, I was able to work with Chris. We diagnosed the mechanical issue, and soon we were back up and running. We made our way into a cove, anchored up for the night, knowing that we were safe. The next day, we returned to fishing as if nothing had happened. There was a peace to being on the water, and the meditative rhythm of the work caused me to sink into myself, to begin really going inside as I stood there, pulling and sorting fish. Often I drifted in daydreams thinking about returning to school, not fully recognizing yet that this experience had changed me. In the 3 months I had been on the FV Misery, I had proven that I could overcome difficult things. I could push myself and knew that I was more than the story that I was told as a young man. I learned that it didn't matter if other people thought I was something or not. It mattered what I thought about myself. I now realize that the story I was told as a kid is false. Yes, I am gay. But the story I tell about what it means is of my own choosing. Sometimes believing something is real is enough to cause us to act as such. And today, I believe that I matter. I believe that you matter, that we matter. I share my journey with you, the mythic narrative that has brought me here, this hero's journey, not to elicit any sympathy, I assure you I'm quite fine, but rather to invite you into possibility. In life, each of us is on our own journey. And each of us is wrestling with our own story. Sometimes it's a story we have been told about ourselves that we accept and cherish. And in such instances, hold tight to that story. Cherish it. Other times, however, it's a story about not being good enough. A story about not being worthy of love. And in such circumstances, I encourage you to remember the arc of the hero's journey and know that change and transformation are always possible if you're willing to answer the call and embrace unknown adventure. To the glory of life. I would now like to invite us to stand as you are willing and able, or rise as you are willing and able, and don your masks together to sing our closing hymn of the day, hymn number 1018, Come and Go With Me.
Intro, can you give us 4 beats? Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Come and go with me to that land. Where I'm bound. Come go with me to that land. Come go with me to that land. Come go with me to that land. Where I'm bound. There will be freedom in that land. There will be freedom in that land. There will be freedom in that land. Where I'm bound, where I'm bound. There will be freedom in that land.
So our service has ended, and please repeat after me as I extinguish the flame of our chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth. The warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Our service has ended, but our service to the world and one another begins anew. As we go forth this day, may we remember that change and transformation are possible if we choose to answer the call.